Um, Great, thank you. I look at the typical things, and I have one screen, and I'm sharing, as you can see, the full screen at the moment. I always have my controls with Zoom a little bit hidden, yeah.
So, Stephanie, can I just ask you a quick tech support question before Sandra starts?
Certainly.
Did the conference ask people to agree to being recorded, or do we need to get formal permission from people now?
I think it was part of the registration form, but to be honest, I couldn't swear to it. Would you like me to check with the organizers?
If we need to ask people, that's fine. But if we don't need to ask, it would be better to know.
I'll check.
Thank you.
So
I don't want to record people without their permission. Yeah, I know, Michelle, Zoom asks you anyway, but I would prefer to do we're about to record this session. Does anyone have any objections? But if they opted in as part of the registration process, then we don't need to ask the question. And it's partially for my benefit, well, for everyone's benefit who's running sessions from this point forwards. We don't have to worry about asking that question.
Yeah, and the other thing, so at the moment, every participant, so we are recording already. So if you don't want to, or if you didn't agree, you can keep also your camera off. And
okay, and it's okay. Yeah. So Stephanie's looked, and it's in the privacy policy for the conference, so we're okay.
Oh, fantastic! Great, thank you very much. So yeah, I think I will start here. So. Thank you very much for joining the session. I'm Sandra Gesing. I'm from the Discovery Partner Institute at the University of Illinois, Chicago. This session is about virtual research environment, virtual labs, and science gateways, which we use as synonym. Is fairness sufficient to increase trust in VREs and to foster critical thinking? That is our topic today. And let's see. So if we look at research computing only, because we had this in the past, and I know that we discussed whether, virtual research environment, platforms, virtual labs, science gateways, whether this is really, used as a synonym, and we are using it as a synonym in this interest group. And why are we talking about these concepts? And if you look at research computing, you have plenty of lab instruments. You have web-based agile frameworks nowadays, and they're developing very fast. We have all these distributed data and computing infrastructure which are available to us, and high-speed networks and research software. And of course, the researchers have data and compute-intensive problems. So there's a lot of technology around research, and the researchers have to deal with all the nitty-gritty details normally than to do their research. And that is the need for science gateways and virtual labs and virtual research environments. And so that they help the researcher to focus on the research and make them a happy researcher. And so if you look at therefore I'm looking at the different terminology. So if this is the first time that you hear about science gateways, for example, or virtual lab, you might have heard before about a research portal or a cyber infrastructure or a collaboratory. And I really should adapt this also that we include platforms now, or also dashboards. We think about dashboards often also in the computing environment as virtual research environments. So if we look at the VRE the timeline, so we started with above, it's the 7th plenary, whether we really need an interest group, and there was a lot of interest in an interest group. And then we started to look in different topics that fits really around data and the roadmap for data and research. So if you look at the different topics we had, so we looked at interoperability across different systems, because there is a lot of different systems, mature systems, which can work together, that we can have also sustainability. and that we can do a collaborative development, and how to find these infrastructures and science gateways, and what skills do people need to build and use them. Then we looked at transforming data into information and knowledge. And the next session was then about how to improve sustainability and reproducibility. And we looked more on the design pattern side, on the development side then, and really went into discussing a common reference architecture, which is followed this concept on all the different continents, from Europe to Australia to the US. And then we went into more like, discussing the user community, how to communicate and collaborate effectively. And also the last session in April was about what are the visions for the next 10 years, what we need to do, because if we have to have something in 10 years, then we need to develop it already, so that the researchers can really work with it in 10 years. So that is a little bit the roadmap we had. And for today, we thought about, okay, if we have the technologies people really would like to use, do they trust it, even if we really going into the direction of fair? Is that what people work with, or do we have to have additional topics? Or is fairness really enough that people trust the results? So if you look at the virtual research environment interest group, this is a really ongoing community effort and open-ended. The goal is to have different working groups, and which we got a working group accepted, the FAIR for Virtual Research Environment, and there will be 2 sessions taking place next week. And that will be the extension of the discussions today, but also can be also attended, of course, standalone. So if you have ideas for working groups, we are open to have more working groups, as you can see, about topics you are interested in. You can sign up. We are happy to add topics. So if you look for today, then at trust and critical thinking. So there is this one really, when do you develop trust in a solution, in data? And there are different aspects. There's, for example, the quality of a tool. So if you can easily use it, and which doesn't mean that it has the right, or that it has the correct results, but often it's really this indicator. People trust a tool more if it has that high quality of usability. If it's effective. So effective only means also, do you really check the data, or do you just trust your own feeling about the tool that it is effective? So integrity and resilience are aspects. And critical thinking is more about, so if you trust already a tool, and there might be a result that is not so fitting into the landscape, or that is surprising, do you take it as given, or dependent on which simulation it was a result of? So these were a couple of the questions we looked at and we would like to discuss today. So, and for example, colleagues of mine in the US, they did a research on science gateways, cyber infrastructure, and recognized if you build a science gateway, promote it, and the audience trusts you, then they will also come and use it. So that was the extension from, if you build it, they will come. That doesn't work really in the science gateway space. So we have a couple of questions, but before I go through all the different questions for the discussion and for the group discussion, I would like to switch to a Mentimeter question to get an impression what we all think about 3 questions. So can you see this? And yeah, And I know we have shared the number in the shared document, and also here you can see it again when you go to menti.com, and you can, I like when the dots are coming in, but you are also can of course give just comments in the chat, and I see the comments in the chat. Let me see. So that does occur. Yes. So that was one. Do you trust data in research if it's openly shared? And that is a really interesting result, because I think there's this, we are already at RDA and meeting in a session like this, we are aware of that openly shared data doesn't mean directly that we would trust it always. But I also can see if it's openly shared, at least from my own perception, it's like there's more trust than if I cannot access it, of course. But can I trust it blindly? That is really different. So this is not sure, and yes. So that there's no, I'm happy about that, to be honest, because openly sharing should at least increase the trust. So if we go now to the next question, I wait for another moment. I love when the balls are coming in. So my next question would be, if I can advance, here. So if you work, for example, if you're a user of a simulation for your research, or you further developing a simulation, and so do you test the simulation of a publication and compare your results with the published results? And that would be really interesting, especially if you use, for example, the simulation yourself for your own research. So I know this is a question that could be answered very differently, dependent on whether you use the tool yourself. So I have to admit, if I'm not a reviewer, I seldomly run every simulation again to try to see whether it's really the results out of a publication. So I would be probably more with no than with other. So we have a lot of other here, people willing to maybe share what the other means, that they try it themselves. That would be a yes, probably. Or they know the tool.
So Sandra, do you want us to put something in chat, or do you want us to talk?
I'm fine with those. I have also another question where you can maybe answer that. So let me go to the next question. Maybe there it's also easier if people would like to do that. So yes, oh wow, I like that. So as a reviewer, I do these things. So now I have said again so many things. So if people want to put it in chat, let me have a look at chat. I wanted an it depends option. Yeah, I know with the other I was a little bit also on the brink with, because my answer would be, if I'm a reviewer, I definitely try it and test it. For every publication I work with, probably not. So we have a comment from Abraham. If the software data are shared, then it's easy, but sometimes one of these is missing. So the approach is to try to replicate the steps and see if the result is the same. Yes. so especially if I want to use, for example, the same simulation for research, then I would say, yes, I try to replicate. If I just want to cite just or reference results, I don't test. Yes, I agree, Andrew. That is the same for me. If it's something unexpected, surprising, then I try to also see it more. So my last question in Mentimeter is then, so here you can put really your own little words. This will create a word cloud. So why would you trust the publication result or simulation result, even so it seems off, like it's unexpected, it's surprising? Let's say you work with a simulation tool or a platform where you normally work with, and you have the impression that you could trust it for other use cases. So for example, as the example is established tool, or is it if you, for example, would trust it because of the author? Because in the past you have seen that they have good results. So what would reputation of the author? Yeah. Tool with a trust rating. Yeah, I like that. Or domain standard tool. Yeah, things like that. Are there any other aspects you would add here? Something. So I'm always between really also the author or the researcher behind something, the reputation that I would trust it, even though it's surprising. A peer review process, yes. That is part of the aspects. So any further ideas? Let me look in the chat again. So from Steve is, if the contribution is a model that you are building on, then you will need to prove that you have built of those models. Yes. Simulations are too heavy, impossible to check directly from my release. Other means comparison with data from trusted resources. Already published papers of well-known people, data in open resources, indirect checks of coherence of the data, and check of data with respect to description of method in the paper. Really like that. So I don't trust, I don't use, I understand. A trustworthy journal, number of positive citations. Number of citations. I have to say it's also, so one is really the replication, the reputation of author, number of positive citations, trustworthy journal, trustworthy peer review process. And even we know with a peer review process that it can be so different, dependent how people have time sometimes for the peer review and everything. But I think the peer review process is still also one thing that increases my trust. So replication by peer to provenance of results, I like that. Yeah, and I can see the peer review process and the reputation of the author gets the bigger rating. So this is really great. So I stop down the presentation here. Thank you very much for participating in this. And we will share the results also down in the Google Drive or in the notes document with the URL.
Sandra, can I share can I add the link to the slides in the collaborative notes document also?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
So let me get out of here. So that was a little bit for warming up about the different topics. And yeah, we wanted to continue with the panel here. And we were a little bit unlucky with, so one of our panelists couldn't come because he got last week 2 events really with his teaching, so he cannot get out of that. And I think the other person, I hope everything is okay, but yeah, so we won't have a panel now, but Andrew was so fantastic to join and to plan with me the session here and around these questions. And so that would be what I would like to do now in a group discussion, to talk about these different aspects of trust and critical thinking and in connection with FAIR. So if you look at this, is fairness of VREs the basis for trusting results in VREs? Or does this apply for a subset of VREs? So what we mean with this, if a virtual research environment, if you know that this one is already fair, but would you directly trust them, the results in it, because it has this shareable? And that goes a little bit further from the questions we answered in the Mentimeter. So what do you need really to trust a result in a simulation platform, in a science gateway, in a virtual research environment? And that would be probably, yeah, Andrew?
You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I know, I was typing. I was frantically fumbling for the switch. At the risk of derailing the next hour of discussion, what do you mean by the fairness of a VRE? Do you mean the fairness of the inputs that go into it and the outputs that come out of it? Or do you mean the fairness of the VRE itself?
So that is exactly where I wanted to get to, that it's so hard to say. But how is it, what is fair? When is the VRE fair? And the result is, that can be the software infrastructure itself, and it doesn't have to do then something with the simulations which are running in a VRE. So that means what we want to have is really that the simulation and the data in a VRE are fair as a basis, I think. But that was why I tried to, would that be something that helps you to trust results in a VRE if the VRE itself is fair? Or does it have to be the data and the simulations in the VRE? So that was a little bit my question here. And I know it's hard because the fairness of VREs has so many levels. Why we have the Fair for VRE working group now. And we are very happy that it got accepted on time for the plenary. So maybe I should reformulate the question then. So is it helpful to have the VRE software, the infrastructure itself, fair to build trust? Maybe that is easier to answer.
Do you want us to raise hands? Do you want us to just jump in?
Oh, sorry, yes. You can start. We are such a small group. You probably let me look at raising hands, or you can probably just start to talk or put again comments in the chat.
Yeah. So I came out of a meeting just before this session that was talking about trust in one of the e-research platforms that my organization is investing in. And there were two elements to that discussion. One is, do you trust the underlying infrastructure? Do you believe that, for instance, the data that the VRE is the VRE is working with has not been tampered with? Do you trust the underlying compute infrastructure? So there, if you like, trust questions at the platform level. And then there are trust questions one layer up, which is, do you trust that the data that you're importing into the VRE is of an acceptable standard? And do you trust the model that you're choosing to run? So for me, for this group at least, and for me also, I think it's a two-level question. Is the underpinning infrastructure trustworthy? And then are the specifics of the problem you're trying to solve, the elements of that problem, are they trustworthy?
Yes, I'm totally with you there. Since we have the different levels in VREs, there's a different level. And for me, it would be if I know, for example, that the virtual research environment I'm using, that is trustworthy itself, with monitoring, with starting simulation, with knowing that, that is a process I can trust. It increases my trust also that nothing is off when I use data and simulations in there, but still I have to look at the next level, whether I would like to, or whether I can trust it. So the next question, and this I hope will trigger really discussions. So which knowledge acquisition and transfer skill will we no longer need to learn because machines will take care of it for us? And what will we need to learn instead? Are there any opinions about this? So if you consider, for example, virtual reality, AI methods. So you can see that, machines do something for us. So what is, if it gets really easier and easier for us, but also not so, let's say, if we are not developing it ourselves, then it's hard to say what kind of methods are always behind AI, what kind of methods are behind the virtual reality. So we won't become all experts of these technologies, but we can use certain technologies then easier. So what kind of skills might be more needed? Like, I look at the chat. So we may have to learn healthy distrust. Yes, I totally agree. I think that is our critical thinking. So distrust, critical thinking, and that is part of it. So critical thinking, there are a couple of publications where you can look it up. Like, part of it is, of course, that people are gifted with critical thinking, but it's something we can learn. There are ways to learn to deal with new content. So not everything is just given to people. So it's luckily also something learnable.
Yeah, but there's also an analog that I think many people on this call would be familiar with, which is critical thinking, or to use Stephanie's term, a healthy measure of distrust when it comes to the use of statistics. So you don't just say, oh, SPSS said this, therefore this is a significant finding. You need to make sure that you've coded the data correctly. You need to make sure that you're using the right statistical test for your data. So many of those same kinds of, are we using the right tool? Are we describing the data correctly, that we're used to in the statistical realm for research stats, I think apply in this realm also.
Absolutely, and we have a comment from Abraham. So there are various ways. For instance, Galaxy is already widely accepted in some communities, while others have to adapt their way of working to the platform. Seek for Science is open source, can be configured and adapted to different needs, but there's a need for experts which can adapt the technologies for specific domains. Yes, I totally agree. And let me do something, because all in all, these are all the questions I would like to go through in our discussion, so I can copy it also in our shared notes and can stop share screening, because that makes it a little bit nicer, maybe, that I can see people and can see better the chat and everything. Let me see. Are we here? Oh, in this one. No, wait. I find it.
I'll post it in chat, Sandra.
Okay, great. There it is again. Yeah, sorry for that. My screen. Here we go. Let me put the questions to just here, and then everyone can see it. Great. Let me.
I'll format it, don't worry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I can stop sharing. So thank you very much. So yeah, that would be, so the discussion around trust and critical thinking, I think that's important, because one of the, at least also experiences I made also with students, and in general, so when I showed them a simulation tool, the first reaction is that they just trust the result, even if it looks not, or even if it's surprising, they just trust it because I told them that it's a good simulation tool for their research. And that is the part where I'm really keen on. How do you deal with a situation like that, for example, to know, because that is also the, let's say, the next generation coming, how to teach them better to just have also certain healthy mistrust. I really like that definition. So any ideas, without taking away, of course, we want them to use the virtual research environment. We want them to get more comfortable with the technology. So how would you work with students through this, let's say, fine line between trusting and creating virtual research environments and have a healthy distrust? Any ideas?
Probably teach them what questions to ask and what things to look for. It's a bit meta, but I think something like that. So, which probably plays into your critical thinking skills.
Yes, I like that. The questions and so that is exactly, I think, which kind of question, what to look for, and also I think being open to the concept of it's okay if I also use it to maybe wrong. Let's say with, parameters which don't make sense. So how do we, this typical, if you put garbage in, then garbage comes out. There's not a problem if you realize, oh, I have to check also my own assumptions, how to use a tool. So I think that is part of the discussion also.
Yeah, and in an educational setting, showing people examples of outputs of simulations that looked reasonable but were in fact wrong. Examples of why you shouldn't just blindly trust what comes out. I'm thinking particularly in the case of training data bias and machine learning, but I could probably think of other instances as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That is. So another question we thought about is, who does the trusting for VREs, human or machine, and how does this change the problem?
Yeah, so maybe if I can speak to that.
Yeah.
So this is one of my questions, and the reason I put it there was, I guess it's thinking through the, oh, hi, Ari. It's thinking through the semantics of trust. What does trust mean? Is trust something that only humans can do? And therefore, in an environment where more and more interaction is between machines talking to machines, what does it mean for one machine to, air quotes, trust another machine? And does that mean that we need to rethink the problem? I don't have an answer, by the way. It's something I'm rolling around in my head.
Yeah, I really like this question because we are going in that direction, that we have or we want the interoperability also between machines, and to make it easier and to really use different systems with different foci and strengths and put it in one environment. Yeah, we can use as humans. And so how is a solution like that? Maybe, and I know it's a buzzword and it's coming up with everything, but so maybe something like blockchain between machines is something that could increase trust. Maybe not. I also don't know the answer. So any ideas here? And for people who arrived new, you can raise your hand or put comments in the chat or in the collaborative notes. So this is a group discussion at the moment. Anyone can contribute. So so let's say I'm not, like, oh, the rise of the machines, we have a problem. I don't think that we're at that point. But still, we have to have a look, I think, how far we can trust interactions and the data which results out of it. Any further?
I just joined the session, so I only heard a couple of last comments, so I don't really know what you're talking about. But if you're talking about trust and machines, I think that, of course, in a philosophical sense, Andrew is, of course, completely right that machines cannot trust, but they can, of course, check certificates, and they can also, and this is actually very much connected to the blockchain discussion, what you brought up, that they can check that certain points which has been pre-programmed are suitable, or that they can be even a heuristic method for this kind of approach, that saying that these things are used by somebody else, so who you trust. So you basically think that, okay, they might be trustworthy data sources or service providers because of this. And there is a lot of commercial programs already who are doing this kind of analysis in social media, especially. So in principle, I don't see necessarily a problem there. It's only about, of course, the original programmers, or even the how do you want to frame it, that what is a trustworthy. I'm assuming that you're talking about trustworthy sources of data, or am I right?
Or simulation, yeah, research results.
Oh, also, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and indeed, trust in the underlying infrastructure. Do you have a trustworthy data storage subsystem, which means that you can be confident that no one has been tampering with the underlying data? I'm not suggesting we go to ISO 27000 levels, but there may be a requirement for particular levels of trust in certain settings.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually one thing which I've been in my own work, I've been investigating, is the, for example, core trust seal, is that I don't know if it usually is available when you are starting to use some service, that you get metadata for that service, which explains that they have passed some sort of certifications. And that's only one certification. It doesn't check everything, of course. And so, of course, I think that we have to start to build this kind of set of certificates, which are also machine readable, which will make these things more, let's say, computer understandable. In a sense, we can say ourselves how trustworthy we know that some Zenodo is, but if we don't, if the computer doesn't understand it, it doesn't, and then we have to do it manually.
So we have a further question in the comments. So what if some humans and or machines do and some don't trust the same VRE or parts of a VRE? So that is, yeah, that is an interesting question. So honestly, I think with machines, if it should be then something like a technology like blockchain or certificates to have a peer-to-peer system, maybe that's what we can build. The other thing would be with humans, that is different. That is not something, if they don't trust the VRE, because most VREs have at least a kind of authentication security system. That is, we need to find out the reasons. Why don't they trust it? And Ari, you looked like that you wanted to say something.
No, I'm listening to you, but of course, if nobody else is talking, I can also. I'm just thinking that how do we, in general, how do we trust scientific products from others, and data and models and so on? And it usually comes from the fact that they are, you know, the people, maybe that's one way. The other one is that a lot of people use it, or it's published and it has gone like this open source software. You have a lot of users and it goes through this kind of internal review all the time, and that creates trust. And in general, I could see all of these aspects could be very easily made also machine readable, in a sense, at least how much some sort of VRE is being used, how many publications have been made using it. Who is providing the service? Is it just some guys on little development, or is it an organization with some sort of authority? That these kind of things can be, in general, embedded in some sort of metadata for the service, and they can be then inherited into the service description, which the user can see. But I do understand that some people might not trust the same thing, but this is also true for scientific literature. You can have some theories which some people really deeply trust, and some others think they're complete garbage. And that's the nature of science to me.
Yeah, I agree and disagree on the point that only that it depends also on, of course, what we are talking about. So for a VRE, I can see that people say, oh, maybe this is a complex system. I don't know what part to trust. while I could see, for example, a simulation, if people don't trust the data or the simulation they have for a certain research, then it should be testable whether it really fulfills the model or not. So that would be something at least to replicate. So, but yeah, there's so both sides. And hi, Leila. You want to talk about your comment or bring it up?
I must confess that I am a bit confused with the word trust.
Okay.
On one side, I think trusting is for people, not for machines. But if we apply the term to machines, I need some parameters. I cannot talk about trusting a machine or trusting a process or trusting an algorithm without some parameters. Otherwise, my trusting will not be comparable to your trusting or someone else's trusting. It will be still my subjective feeling. It could be because, no, I have worked with that group before, so I know how to do the things. So I know and I feel that I can trust them. But it doesn't mean that someone else who has not worked with this group trusts them based on what they see from outside. So I think that the trust that we need to define for machines needs some parameters, some sort of things that we can say, oh, it follows, it is open, or if it is not open, they clearly explain why they cannot be open. We understand the process, how the data was gathered, we understand the process, and also understand would need to be better defined. There are some things that I don't know how people can be even thinking on parameters. If we think that, oh, I trust something that I can run myself and I will get compatible results. If I need a quantum computer to run something that other group did and I have no access to a quantum computer, maybe it's wonderful, maybe they're really trustable, but I myself cannot run the process. So I would need in that case some other parameters that I can go with without me running the process. So without those parameters, without the context, I find really difficult to say what is needed to trust a process or machine or algorithm.
Yes, I'm totally with you. So, but that is also one of the aspects to say, okay, we need the parameters. So if we have parameters, so we had a little bit this discussion, when do you trust, for example, a publication? And there was one of the answers was, oh, I trust it when there is a peer review process. You know, when I can replicate things. And as you said, I don't have a quantum computer, and if someone publishes something created with a quantum computer, so how do I trust this one without being able to replicate, even if they share all the data openly? So I can totally see that there are different circumstances, of course. So even if, let's say, if we would have everything fair with a quantum computer, it would be still also, for me at least, so I'm not an expert for quantum computing. So I still, even if they share everything openly, if I can find it, but I cannot replicate it because I'm not having the computer, there's still a certain, yeah, can I trust it with the parameters that they present me? That is probably hard to say. And I think we have more situations like that. So how could we then, instead of them saying, oh, should I just, let's say, have the blind trust that because they're openly sharing it, that it's correct? Or what would be the right way with critical thinking, or, you know, having this kind of a little bit healthy mistrust? What would be the step how a virtual research environment, for example, could help. Maybe in creating a simulation environment for quantum computing, but then it's a simulation environment. So then we first have to prove that the simulation environment creates the same situation a quantum computer creates, and we have the next level. So we have this a kind of staggering more and more levels to be able, or to make it a replication of results. So another question I would like to discuss is, so what elements are needed to enable trust in the outputs of virtual research environments? So because one is to say, oh, this is now the software framework, and then we have simulations in there, or data analytics steps, or the kind, let's say we had the example already for with Galaxy as one of really widely used science gateways. And so what do we need that really the output for using this creates trust? I see that there's a lot of, I didn't want to interrupt any discussion, so I see there's some nice discussions going on in the shared notes. So we can also continue first there. So I see.
Could somebody put the link to the notes in the chat, because if you come late, you don't see the chat from the beginning.
Sorry, I will do it. Oh, thank
Thanks.
you, Stephanie.
Sorry, we did it a couple of times throughout the session, but I think you may have come in just after the last time.
Thanks.
Well, let me go.
Overall, if I'm now trying to figure out with this trust thing, that, I mean, we as scientists, in many cases, and even outside of science, you just basically have to trust other people's, that somebody has checked it, that it's even possible to check. So if you don't have, let's say this quantum example, you don't have access to that, but you know that somebody does. And somebody, this is also true for any article published, that usually referees have checked a lot of things, and that's how the quality control basically works. And so, of course, I completely understand we need also metrics for this one. And one of these metrics could be that there is a way of checking this, and some people might have actually done this. And this is the model how basically all open source software works already. And if you are ever used any Linux system, I'm pretty sure that you haven't checked yourself how the kernel has been written. I definitely haven't, but I trust that somebody has. And so basically, that's the basic idea there, is that you basically need to have methods for that one, and maybe some level of documentation that something has been done. I completely understand that we need these metrics, that you need some way of showing that some people have done maybe some level of checking on it. You can also think about this kind of certification route, or you can think about this kind of transferable trust, meaning that if some organizations or people who you know have used this for their publications, that would make it trustworthy for you. That's one model. There's a lot of different models of this kind of trust changing, and actually blockchain is very much about not trusting anybody except those who have worked on this chain.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go to the comments also. So we had the comment, I struggle a bit with trust as a one-dimensional concept. When it comes to people, I may trust my neighbor with my house keys, that do not develop a simulation or perform brain surgery. Yes, I agree, I would never do that. I'm wondering if the notion of fit for purpose comes in here for VREs, for example, equivalent for competence.
So maybe to elaborate, I'm just wondering whether, I mean, I have to admit that my knowledge of VREs is not terribly great, but would you look at things and say, oh, this might work in this particular context with this type of data, but it might not work for this particular context or this particular question? So would you actually, so for data sets, for example, we would look at that and say, yes, you can use it for this, but you can't use it for that. Would there be something similar for VREs, or is this sort of completely off the rocker?
Yeah, so the EcoCommons platform that my organization, sorry, our shared organization in this context, Stephanie, is investing in, has exactly that. You can choose particular data sets and then choose which species distribution simulation you want to run against those data sets. Or you can start from the simulation point of view and say, okay, I'm going to use this particular model, and now I want to choose the data sets to go with it. So it's very analogous, I think.
Yes, I fully agree also to Andrew here. So there are different aspects also in virtual research environment, I think. And Andrew, thank you very much. I think you probably have to go now. Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I know. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So thanks a lot for taking notes. So yeah, there is in virtual research environments, I think, since they're made for a specific, research domain, for example, let's say Galaxy has set up these tools for different use cases. So you might be then the expert for, let's say, having to trim a genomic sequence. So I think the researcher knows then the results they expect and what they trust. But it's not that we can say in general, oh, this data or this way is always the right way, because the VRE is going in so many different research domains that it's per research domain. And yeah, the trust is, I know it's not a one-dimensional concept at all. I totally agree. We need the competence for checking, let's say, a couple of things to trust something. But as Abraham also said, at the beginning, like it's not that you can know everything always. So that there is a certain level where we need then maybe to say, okay, if this is peer reviewed and these experts have said it's okay, so I take it from there, like the brain surgery you brought up. I will never do a brain surgery, but I trust them, the expert for it, that they do it the right way. So and I think we have a similar thing here, that not everyone can be an expert for everything. Therefore, the concept of virtual research environment came up, because we can be experts of certain aspects of virtual research environments. Maybe we are, in the research domain that is tackled by an instance, or we are the developer who can do the authentication and security in the background and the connection to infrastructures. And so yeah, let's go to the other example. So I like this example. D4Science is operating with 99.8% availability and 24/7 service reliability, because it also shows somehow when the trust will be lost is that availability, reliability goes under those percentage for a period of time or some threshold. Yes, that is the other thing: resilience, availability, documentation. So that creates trust. I'm totally also on that aspect. Leila, you want to say more about this?
Yes, is that I was thinking we can find some data sets that are manually created, so by humans. And those are commonly more trust than the ones that have been automatically curated. But then we go into a funny thing, is that automatic means are created to pick up some sort of mistakes that curators do. So they can review that, because sometimes they miss things that an automatic process can kind of pick up, or at least trigger an alarm and say like, huh, this looks odd. And then the curators do that. So we know that humans make mistakes, and well, it's the humans who at the end build the machines and build the processes and the algorithms. So we need to accept that something is trustable. It doesn't mean that it is 100% reliable or 100% anything. It is not perfect. And we need to remember that as well. So also knowing that kind of, I'm thinking, for instance, in a commercial product, like, I don't know, let's say that we promise that our batteries will last more than 10 hours. And then you realize, commenting with friends, that it's never 10 hours, it's only 9. And you say, 9.5 is close enough. It's okay, I still will buy them. But if you say that it's usually 7, no, for me, it's usually 5, you know, or if you use it in these sort of devices, forget about it. You will have to change it every month. I don't know, something like that. Then you lose the trust, because they promised you something and then they are not delivering that. So yeah, it's not that you will immediately lose trust. It's not that, oh, this battery is not good. Well, you know, there is a quality process. Sometimes a battery will pass the quality process when it should have not, because sometimes they don't test every single battery, but some in a batch. So you know, as a human, that happens sometimes. But it is important to also know, and I can imagine that those limits might change from person to person. So for someone, they promise 10 and you'll only get 9.8, that is no. But for some people, 9.5 can still be okay. So I don't know if that kind of things can be modeled. If we can put rules to it, so we can say like, oh, this is, I don't know, trustable 4 in a scale of 5. I'm not so sure.
I'm absolutely with you there, because trust is also a personal thing. And user experience, expectation. So I think it's a lot also about handling expectations. So for example, making promises. Yeah, I agree. Trust is tied to perception and expectations. Yes, I totally agree to that. So I think one part of creating with VREs also trust is to handle expectations and be like, okay, this is something, for example, we offer it in an academic environment. That means we are not like, you know, offering at a service level like a bank, for example, that needs like a 99.9999%, you know, availability of their tools. No, please expect we do our best, but it's, you know, it might be some downtime in between, and we give our best to make it at convenient times and all these things. But I think that is handling expectations, yeah. And luckily we are all have different expectations sometimes, but I think we have a framework around that, like availability of a service, whether it is used by teams. That was also one of the examples. We trust that team with their own perception, and that they're checking tools and know about how to use in that research area the tool. So there's also this, let's say, level of trust. if other experts are using it, that we say, oh, if they are using it, I think I can also trust it. So it's not a mathematical formula. Let's say it like this. It's really it depends on a lot of human factors. So another question. Let me look before I overlook something in the comments. So another question I would like to touch on is, how do we enable the trustworthiness of outputs of VREs to be interrogated by downstream users of those outputs? So this question is more, so the researchers, let's say that they trust the VRE and the simulation or the analytics they have, they have done this in the VRE. And so how can we make it really better for people downstream reusing this? So we, at the beginning of the session, we discussed a little bit, so how do we trust the publication results or simulation results? And there was peer review process, or there was like that we can replicate it. Let's say for users of data where it's almost clear that they cannot replicate it, like our example with a quantum computer, maybe for me. And so what can we do besides, let's say, the concept of fairness to increase really the trustworthiness for people working with simulation publication results? Any ideas there? What kind of framework would be helpful? So Steve, what is the difference between confidence and trust? That is a good question. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
When I was listening to the, I guess the artifacts, the things that you were listing as things that were could provide trust, the immediate thing came to my mind was I could see how they inspire confidence, but I'm not sure that they inspire trust. That was why I asked the question. Are we talking about confidence? Are we confident that the thing does what we says it does? It may be different to whether we trust it. I'm not sure.
I love this question. So in this, would it be maybe then we have not to talk about trust, but more about confidence that we can reuse results? Because trust, but also confidence, both is a very, let's say, concept of the personal feeling about something. I get that. So,
well, maybe confidence could more strongly align to fit for purpose, for example, and that was raised earlier. Because for a VRE, it does something. So, how confident are we that it actually does that thing?
Yeah.
I know. I just thought as you were speaking, I just thought.
No, I mean, maybe this is really what we have to instead of talking about trust and critical thinking, maybe it's more confidence and critical thinking. So maybe that is what we need to see because of the individual. Yes. So, Leila, you would like to talk about confidence intervals?
Not really, but look, I'm not a native speaker. So immediately someone asked, what is the difference? I went to a dictionary. And well, if I just read the definitions, they are too close for me to be really able to distinguish them truly. But then I remember that in stats, we talk about confidence intervals. I don't remember trust intervals. So I don't know if we can give kind of two really distinct meanings regarding science, or if because I kind of think that trustability, which is kind of the thing that well, all the elites that we use nowadays, but I kind of think that trustability it is not such an old word. So it's something that has become used in more or less recent years. And then, I mean, trustability is kind of easier than confidentiality. I would not even know how to say that. So I'm wondering if it's just, I really don't know if there is a distinction that we need to make about those two words within the context we are discussing it.
Yeah. I honestly don't have an answer to that. I love that the discussion goes in that direction, and also Stephanie, you would like to explore that topic a little bit more with your comment?
Sorry, my comment comes from the fact that 20 years ago, I actually did research in this field, and we looked at trust in networks, social networks. And one of the things we distinguished was the confidence in the whole system versus the trust between individual actors in the network. So that's, for me, that jumped out. And then there's a third factor, distrust. And that, to me, jumped out when we talked about trust and confidence. But this is very tainted by this sort of requirements engineering research 20 years ago.
Yeah, but that is great. So that is, I really love this discussion, because the distinguishment, trust is such a really individual feeling, and confidence seems to be more measurable. Like, yeah, I might be wrong there, but that I don't think that we can find metrics really for trust, to be honest. Maybe there are metrics, and you have done research on that, Stephanie. So is there metrics for trust, or is it for confidence?
Honestly, as I said, that was 20 years ago, so I'm not really au fait with what's been happening recently in the field.
Okay.
I know that we worked on sort of metrics for trust, confidence, and distrust, but that was sort of very agent-based, and yeah, probably not what you're looking at here.
Okay. No, but that is a great discussion. And Michelle, you want to, so you want to create a new word, the confidentiality?
Well, Layla had created it, so I think that's definitely, we've had a great session if that's what we've achieved. But we just need to figure out what exactly the word is.
Yeah. Great. So Steve, confidence.
Yeah. So that's our confidence. Obviously, we heard as a frequentist meeting. Typical stats, normal things. But in probability theory and sort of Bayesian stats, belief is that subjective probability distribution. You can put it. That's gonna call it the belief, right? So it has a meaning, so similar to confidence. I don't know that we have one in sort of that mathematical world or computer science world for trust, other than it being a buzzword in IT, right? Like people talk about trust in computing in salesman speak. So I'm a vote for confidentiality.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, I know it's a kind of a buzzword. I'm totally with you. On the other hand, the experience shows that if researchers don't trust a framework or a software, they won't use it. So there is this interplay of, it has to have benefits for them, for the research, and especially going to a new technology, maybe. So if they have for years already a way to do their research, let's say, then kind of unhappy maybe with the usability, but to go then to a virtual research environment has to have some factors for them, like does it fit to their way of working? Does it benefit them? These are aspects. There's some research about when do people really adapt a technology. And trust is one of the aspects that they trust the technology to do the expected thing. And that is what we talked about, expectations. And but yeah, confidence, I like it. We probably have, it would be great to look a little bit deeper into that we need confidentiality.
I think that the key point of trust, though, in this context, what you just mentioned about that when people start to use some sort of new VRE, is that there has been enough of distrust originally, and that it goes through some sort of level of skepticism from the science community, and then throughout this kind of process it becomes trustworthy, because then it starts to fulfill. People write publications and people make science which is not before possible with it, and others believe in it. And of course, I mean, science is really a very much trust-based or system, that it's based on the fact that a lot of people have tried a lot of things, and then it creates this kind of legitimacy for the results, because it seems to be that they are valid. And in this case, of course, if it's a very efficient system, and then after this initial barrier, it creates this kind of community of users, it becomes more trustworthy. From computers, this is of course hard to understand, but what they can definitely follow, and what I mentioned earlier, is that how much of this service has been used to create some scientific products and what kind of products they are. Overall, I think that from the point of view of user, we can definitely create metrics, which were mentioned before, and how they are then communicated to the user is important as well. You could say that you could exactly use like a word confidence, whatever, that your whatever VRE thinks that this subsystem has high confidence because of, and you could see even probably the metrics. That's how you would communicate it to the user. And of course, user might instead think that, oh, it's just this people who publish in that rubbish journal, I don't trust them at all, and then ignore it. But I think, of course, you have to think about how to communicate this kind of information to the users to make it really trustworthy. But in the end, then you end up with the service which basically everybody uses at some point, if it's really shown by time and use, especially use, to be trustworthy.
Yeah, I really like that. Okay, so we are coming near to the end of our session. So for the last 10 minutes, just another reminder, there is next week's working group. So everyone is welcome to join the working group on FAIR for VREs. The idea with the working group is also really to create the agenda. We have a suggestion for the agenda for the 18 months of the working group, but we are happy to adapt it, of course, to the community need and to the community discussion. And it would be great to see you there again and to discuss further and look into this topic of FAIR and virtual research environment, because it has many levels. It has the software framework, it has the content, it can be workflows in a virtual research environment. And I really love the discussion now about the trust and confidence and around solutions. And I think it's an important discussion to work with the adoption of virtual research environments and science gateways. So the next question would be, so at the beginning of the session, I presented a little bit that we went from, in this interest group to look from definition of the science gateways and virtual research environments to aspects like sustainability, reproducibility, to to really patterns, interoperability, to have a reference architecture now, also the community aspects. This one was about how can we trust, what are the expectations for virtual research environment, is fairness enough? So what would be another topic you would like to see in an interest group for virtual research environment and science gateways? Are there ideas you would like to discuss in the next plenary? Okay, so one of our ideas is to continue the next time and setting it up already, to have this aspect of, for the vision also of the next 10 years, which we had in the last plenary, to involve maybe funding bodies, invite people from directorates or funding bodies to what they would like to see, how, and from our side discussions how they could support more that we can create virtual research environment and science gateways, because it's often hard to get the sustainability for the frameworks, since funding agencies often would like to see always new research, and we understand, but to have the sustainability of framework, it's important to have also some funding to maintain them, to continue to extend their features, and it's not always all new research. So that would be one of the ideas. And Michelle, is there any overlap with the GOG and GOSC work? So I think we have some overlap. So I'm normally part of the sessions. I just couldn't join in the last one. So Pascal, could you explain a little bit the VRE urbanization? And if you are talking, you're muted.
Okay, you heard me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you study this subject already in this interest group, but I think a lot of services are going on now, and I think the VRE is a place for integrated all the services, and I think the VRE urbanization is a topic.
Okay. So I will look a little bit at the moment. I haven't heard too much about it, but I'm happy to look into it. So everything that is new can be exciting. So thank you for the suggestion. So with the GORC and GOSC, these are also RDA working groups. Since we are in the first session here, you might be able also to join them in the next days. I think GOSC is also taking place tomorrow. I'm not totally sure. So, but they will take place during this plenary also. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for great discussions. We are almost at the top of the hour. And I see. GORC is in the breakout 4. So thanks, everyone. And hope to see you in other sessions and catch up. And have a great day for most people, afternoon, evening. There must be some people within the evening, I guess. And yeah, Stephanie, especially thank you also for taking notes and everything. So have a great day. Bye.